The Nintendo Switch has pretty much started out unlike no other Nintendo system in the history of Nintendo's business. One of the things that I find very fascinating about the Nintendo Switch is how fast that it's been able to accumulate different big selling titles, whether it's first party games or even third party games. And that's the more shocking thing when it comes to the big information that we're going to be talking about today, is breaking the myth of what usually people think about Nintendo systems and third party games. Now, we don't have all of the information when it comes down to this, but I wanted to break it down first from a Nintendo perspective, and then I wanted to go into the third party stuff, then from the perspective of the consumer and how it ties back into everything and what you could see, especially this year on the Nintendo Switch when it comes to first party game development and also third party game development. Now, starting off with the Nintendo Switch and the sales. Now, we got the sales numbers before, obviously 84.5 million. It's well on the way to 100 million units sold before the end of the year, which would be breaking a record from what I can understand anything that Nintendo's done anytime recently when it comes down to their systems. I think only the Nintendo DS would be pacing as fast, but that's something that we've already talked about a bit and we will talk about as we get closer to that 100 million unit number. But I wanted to discuss all of the million selling games, especially some of the new ones that have jumped into the mix. Now, the Nintendo Switch is about 4 years old, going on its 5th year, and it already has 37 million sellers in total. Now, from what I remember, or from what I can kind of dig up, I haven't seen another system do that ever when it comes to first party games in this amount of time. So 4 years, 37 million titles that have sold 1 million units or more. And you guys are seeing this list right here. The new entries in was Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury at number 15. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening as well has been updated. And shout outs to my man Pierre485 that put together this chart right here. Now, these are all the 37 known million sellers, but from what I can remember, even going back to the Wii and also with the Nintendo DS, I think that system also did something similar to this. But when it comes to home consoles, never happened before in Nintendo's history this fast for 37 first party million selling titles. That is absolutely insane. And that's just the ones that we know about. Sometimes Nintendo has some stuff that's kind of sneaky when it comes down to it. Like, we don't know some of those digital sales numbers with certain games. Maybe something like Snipper Clips, for example, could be over 1 million, or some of their other smaller titles as well. But it's crazy to see that. I mean, all the way down from Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, Astral Chain in there at number 36, all the way to the top here at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Animal Crossing New Horizons. The Nintendo Switch has kind of set a whole separate standard when it comes to first party sales of games, combining of course the flop of the Wii U and those games and bringing it to a brand new audience, and combining that with also new games that have innovated in their genres like Animal Crossing New Horizons and also something like Super Mario Odyssey, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Luigi's Mansion 3. I mean, there's a number of new titles along with also other games that people didn't get a chance to play or just didn't buy at all that have gotten new life on the Nintendo Switch or innovated past what we thought that it could do. Just when we thought like, hey, this franchise is tapped out, we've played everything, something new comes to the table and Nintendo is able to kind of exceed what they even thought for sales in a lot of these new games. Pretty much every time Nintendo has these different types of sales investors meetings, they're always like, well, we didn't expect it to do as well as it did. They said that with Animal Crossing, they said that with Luigi's Mansion, Super Mario Odyssey. I mean, all of these games, a lot of them more like it, are like the best selling in the franchise's history. And Nintendo's been making some of these games for like 30 years when it comes to like Legend of Zelda or Super Mario, and the fact that they're already the best selling on the Nintendo Switch despite the system not being done anywhere near done at least is very impressive, especially over the Nintendo Wii, which of course has a bigger install base than the Nintendo Switch, yet these games are selling better. So I think it's just a combination of multiple different factors, the quality of the game, of course, the appetite of Nintendo Switch gamers out there, but also reaching out and having that portable play in addition to the home console play has pretty much reinvigorated fans to kind of get back into it and get new people in playing Mario for the first time, or playing Zelda for the first time, or Luigi's Mansion, or like Yoshi's Crafted World, or Xenoblade, or all these other types of games out there. So it's very good to see that. But I think the biggest difference and the contrast that you see between the Nintendo Switch and also with the Wii is that you see a lot of the core type of titles in the top 10 or in the top 20, 30, whereas with the Wii, what you saw was a lot of like the Wii Fit, we play, we whatever, we this, we that, we sports. And this one, you have stuff like the actual core titles that people are playing, like Pokemon Sword and Shield or Super Mario Odyssey or Splatoon, games like that that are a little bit more for the dedicated audience out there, but can also bring in the expanded audience as well. So very impressive, something that I haven't seen before from another Nintendo system out there, and I'm pretty sure that's a record for Nintendo. But I also wanted to talk about something else which completely busts a myth that people have talked about when it comes to the Nintendo Switch, and that is third-party selling games. Now, for the past year, 36 titles sold 1 million units. Now, 22 of those titles were Nintendo published games. 14 of those games were third-party publishers. So that completely shatters the myth that you can't sell third-party games on the Nintendo Switch, that you can't have success on the platform, that there's no way that you can put your game out, which it's kind of already gone considering there's already multiple third-party sellers, and we've seen other companies come out and say, yes, the Nintendo Switch has been profitable for us even when it's a big game, like let's say The Witcher, for example. That was profitable for CD Projekt Red, and I'm pretty sure that's a million seller on the Nintendo Switch. Last time that we did see the numbers, I think it was like at 700,000 or so, and that was a bit ago, and the game's still continuing to sell. So the fact that you can actually put out your game on there, and in the last year 14 different million sellers, that is going to play a big role, a very big role into how the Nintendo Switch is, not only at this point with the games that we're going to be getting. E3 is coming up, and that's going to be huge because third-party developers are seeing this, especially the Japanese third-party developers, and of course independent developers as well. But I think even going into the next system, it's all about momentum. It's all about having the confidence and the idea that, hey, this is going to be a system that continues to do well. So having 14 third-party titles sell 1 million in the past year alone is going to play huge dividends with that trust and with getting more titles on the system. This is something that I think sometimes gamers don't look at because they just kind of want to see the game that's right in front of them, and that's okay. That's fine. I mean, it's all about the games at the end of the day, but there's also a logistics behind how we get those games and what's going on with it. So when I see something like this, I definitely want to make sure that I talk about it and also continue to encourage people to try stuff that is outside of what your normal comfort zone is for third-party titles. I mean, I know that I've seen some people say like, oh, well, Nintendo needs to release like 5 million games a year. Well, if you do that, you're not going to get the third-party developers any type of breathing room or really anything in order to get their games out and have some success as well. There needs to be a little bit of a methodical approach in terms of when you place your games, where you place them, what games you put them next to, because there's only a limited amount of money and time that people do have to spend on these type of things, and a limited amount of time in the year in terms of months and how you're going to position things. So I think that's probably one of the unsung things about the Nintendo Switch, and people don't necessarily factor in enough, is timing, when you release games, when big third-party games come out, how you space them, how you look at different things, because stuff is starting to get pretty crowded, especially on the third-party front. In July, for example, there's just so many games coming out, and some of those games aren't going to do as well because they're just positioned right next to so many different things. So you do have to space things out a little bit. You have to make sure that you plan things a bit better, and while it's not perfect on the Nintendo Switch, it's not bad, I would say. It still is better than what they've done before in the past, which is the reason why they've been able to sell so many third-party million sellers. So this is one of the best things on here. This is big news for Nintendo fans, and it's good that people are trying out third-party games and playing them on the system, whether they're independent titles or they're big third-party games as well. And I think that we're going to have a couple more to add to the list this year, with stuff like Monster Hunter Stories coming out and No More Heroes coming out as well. Neo: The World Ends With You. All of those have a good shot at selling 1 million plus on the Switch by itself, and it's summer, so people have a bit more time as well looking for different types of games to play. So I'm interested in seeing how that evolves in the future with some of the games that are coming up. But what do you guys think about this when it comes to these two different things? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comment section below. Now, moving on to the next thing here, we're going to talk about some potential bad news when it comes to Metroid Prime Trilogy, Metroid Prime games, on the Nintendo Switch, but I think that there's a little bit more to the story that needs to make sure that we put some context into this. So, a former Retro Studios dev says that Metroid Prime Trilogy port would take a lot of effort and is skeptical of it even happening. So this comes from Mr. Michael Wakan, who spent many years at Retro Studios playing a big role in the original Prime Trilogy as a senior designer, and also Donkey Kong Country Returns. So he said this recently on a Facebook page. He basically goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, that this was a huge effort to kind of get these games on the Nintendo Wii when it comes down to it. Metroid Prime 1 and 2 were okay, we just add some motion controls, but Metroid Prime 3 had a number of things when it comes to motion controls that was built for that, and it was very tough. There's a lot of scripted elements with it. It's using volumetric triggers in order to have different type of gameplays, detecting motion and precise manners to do very specific things, so it would be very tough to kind of convert that to the regular controls, and he doesn't feel that gyro would be a adequate replacement for what they did with the IR pointing controls on the Nintendo Wii. But he also said that it'd be very tough from a manpower perspective, that it would take at least 1 year to actually convert this with, like, let's say a team of 5 people or so, because Retro no longer has a functional editor tools to work with the Prime code base, so everything would have to be brute forced and hard coded, so it'd take a lot of work. But I do feel that there's a number of things being said here. One, this person hasn't worked at Retro Studios in the past decade. So that's one thing that we have to note here, which a lot of these articles that I'm reading don't say that. He hasn't been there in a decade, so he has no idea what they're doing. He wasn't even there when the planning for the Nintendo Switch was really getting into place there. He had already left before that. And on top of it, we see other games that have been coming out that have taken motion controls and have calculated them into regular standard controls. Stuff like The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, for example. Now, I'm not saying it's the exact same thing, but people said the exact same thing when it comes to The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Back when the rumors came out about a year or 2 years ago that Skyward Sword was coming to the Nintendo Switch, people said there's no way, there's certain things with exactly how it's coded with the motion controls, what you'd have to have that, you can't do it with button controls, and here you go. So I think it's really based off of the determination of what Nintendo wants to do. And I would feel that they would get the job done in this case when it comes to Metroid Prime, because if you're going to release Metroid Prime 4 on the Nintendo Switch, there's no way that you're not going to have Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3 on the system for people to play. There's no way that you can release a Metroid Prime 4 and not give a lot of the new audience, especially if you want to make Metroid into a bigger franchise. There's no way that you can't have that on there for people to play, because it's very unlikely that people are going to jump into something titled Metroid Prime 4 if they never got the opportunity to play Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3 and aren't going to emulate it or aren't going to have a Wii or Wii U to play the game. And you want things to be on the Switch, you want the base on there. So I do think that it will happen, and I feel that he's just simply talking about it because, one, he used to work there, and two, he's just skeptical just because of what he knows when he was at the company. But I do feel, based off of a variety of different things, I feel that it is still going to happen. On top of that, we've had a number of people that do have information, you know, potentially more, say, hey, you know what, like, I get what he's saying here, but it's still going to happen in this way, shape, or form. And the reason why that it hasn't been announced, or we haven't talked about it yet, is because Metroid Prime 4 was scrapped, and it was supposed to tie into it with what they're doing with Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3, the trilogy, and also when Metroid Prime 4 comes out. So that was the biggest reason why. But we'll have to wait and see on this one. Let me know what you guys think. I think it's going to be very exciting to see when Metroid Prime Trilogy comes out, if or when it does. I'm still on the boat based on what I've heard, that Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch is a thing and will be coming out when they've got more of a solid plan for what they're going to do with Metroid Prime 4. And of course, spacing the titles and making sure that there's a adequate and proper reveal for Metroid Prime Trilogy and also Metroid Prime 4 as well, to get people into the franchise, because Nintendo wants this to sell. They don't want it to be a 1 million units or 2 million units. They want it to actually be a high selling system because it's Metroid Prime. It's something that's going to take a lot of development time and resources to make. It's not a cheap thing to make a Metroid Prime game. So they need people to get into it, but you need to market it the right way. So what do you guys think about all of this that we discussed here? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here, check out the links in the description. We've got Twitter. Go and give us a follow on there. Stay up to date on all the latest gaming news and information. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video if you can. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.